you. That's a long introduction. I appreciate it. Feels like I've been in the business too long with that kind of introduction, but it's really a pleasure to be here. It was great coming into Hawaii a couple of days ago and have an opportunity to enjoy the sunrise. I miss a lot of sunset because I'm usually in bed by sunset time, but it's a beautiful island, obviously, and you guys are really lucky to be able to call this your home. I am actually, after this, tomorrow I'm heading over to Maui for a little family vacation. I figured I'm all the way out here, should stay out here and spend some money and enjoy the sun. As mentioned, I was chair emeritus. I was a chair several years back. AREAA was, how many of you know about AREAA? Okay. A few of you, that's great. AREAA was established about 13 years ago. Let's give you a little history on the organization. 13 years ago with a very simple idea, which is to give Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, an opportunity to come together to promote housing issues, home ownership issues that impact our communities in a very unique way. That simple idea turned into an organization now that has 37 chapters throughout the United States, and we have 2 in Canada. We have a chapter right here in Hawaii. We call it the Aloha chapter, and we have a couple of our board members from our Aloha chapter in the back. Melvin and Rhonda, oh, there she is. And Melvin, they, along with a number of other people, are involved in promoting housing issues, home ownership efforts, as it relates to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders here in the island. But it is today, AREAA today is the largest Asian American-based organization in the United States, membership organization in the United States. In that 13-year period, we've been able to grow quite extensively. In fact, we just got back, and we do some work not only in the U.S., but we also do work overseas as well. We just got back, a few of us, about 60 some odd of us, went to China last week, and we had a 3-city conference, and attended by over 1,000 attendees. There's a lot of efforts around kind of promoting international business. In this case with China, but we do it in other places. For instance, we have an office actually in Tokyo as well, and so we do a lot of work throughout Asia. But our principal goal and our principal focus is here in the United States. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about kind of the trends in home ownership as it relates to Asian Americans, and also talk about some global business issues that may impact you and something that you should maybe be aware of. I just want to do a quick, you know what, one of the things that I found, I got here and I see the Star Wars theme, and I didn't realize you guys were taking that really that seriously, so I thought, I thought maybe I should change the name of my talk, and like, I don't know, The Emperor Strikes Back or something, but I think it's too late for me to change the name at this point. But just by show of hands, how many of you are of Asian descent, Asian Pacific Islander descent? How many of you? How many of you are related to someone of Asian American Pacific Islander descent? Okay. How many of you have friends that are of Asian American descent? Okay. So how many of you did not raise your hand? Because we'll have friends, we'll match you up with some friends, so you can, so everyone can raise your hand. Hawaii is a very unique market, as you know, an island. But, you know, the Asian community, Asian American Pacific Islander community make up the majority of the population, I believe, right? 53%. It's certainly not the case anywhere else in the United States. So it's very unique. But some of the experiences that the community goes through, the immigrant nature of our community, all that, there are some commonalities and similarities that we all share. And so we'll kind of go through those issues. And I also want to thank, the reason I'm here actually, not only the organizers wanted me to come and participate, but there was one person, a couple of people in particular, PJ, where is he? There he is, with the pink shirt, kind of pink, reddish shirt from Radiant. He called me up and he said, Jim, we'd like you to come out to Hawaii What do you think? And I said, sign me up, I'm there. So, but it was, but I didn't realize it was right after China, so my whole time clock is really screwed up right now. So I don't know what time zone I'm in. And Michelle, who's also back there with Gradient, who has been really involved with supporting our local AREAA chapter. Thanks to both of you for everything you guys do for the organization as well. Let me just kind of run through first kind of US demographics and all that. And we'll kind of hit on these points, the kind of the evolution of the US Asian demographics, kind of it may feel a little weird because the Asian community here is the dominant community, but in the mainland, in the States, in the mainland, it's not the case. So it's an interesting dynamics that we're going through. The lending impact and opportunities, we'll talk a little about lending, and then influence of foreign buyers on local real estate, not only here in Hawaii, but throughout the United States as well. And then we'll talk a little about the China factor, which is, I just got back from China, and there's quite an amazing place, and there's obviously a lot of money flowing out of that country, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well, kind of to wrap up. New household formation. This is the big thing in the mainlands, because the minority community is transforming the U.S. housing market in a fundamental way. And this is based on a Harvard Joint Center report that uses the U.S. Census data. They project out where the growth in population is going to come from. And that drives housing acquisition, financing, and all that stuff. So if you look at, and people, as you know, the Hispanic community is the largest minority community, and there's been primarily a discussion about when it comes to minority issues and all that's been talked about as kind of a Hispanic issue. The fact is that the African American community is also going to grow quite extensively, and so is the Asian American community. Asian Americans currently, what's your guess as to what's the population of the Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders in the United States as a percentage? 5? You obviously read something that that's correct. It's 5%. 5%, a little higher. It's moving up, but it's between 5 and 6% of the U.S. population. But if you look at where it's going over the next 15 or a little less than 15 years, the Asian community is going to accelerate in terms of the amount of household contribution to the United States. And it's traditionally when people think about Asian Americans, where are they going to go to? Where are they going to live? It frankly has been traditionally viewed as New York, San Francisco, and LA, and obviously Hawaii, right? I mean, that's where the Asian community goes, but now it has fundamentally changed. So Asian community are moving past your traditional gateway cities into other places. Do you know the 4th largest Asian American community in the country? You know where that's at? It's Houston. Houston, Texas is the 4th largest Asian American community. 20 years ago, it wasn't even on the map for the Asian community, but it's fundamentally shifting where the community is going. So you can kind of see where the growth is, and it's starting to move, West Coast. You see the high density in the East Coast, but you're starting to see it all throughout the country as well, and that's going to continue to evolve as the years go on. The Asian American community in the United States is the fastest growing community. Is that a surprise to you? No? No. You know what, I think for a lot of people, it is, because they thought, okay, the Hispanic community is the fastest growing community, it's not the Asian community. No, the fact is, since year 2010, year 2000 to 2010, there's been a faster growth of Asian American community in the United States than the Hispanic community, which isn't that far behind, but it's not the fastest. The projection for growth to 2015 is that the Asian community is going to continue to grow rapidly. So the influence of our community is going to expand throughout the next several decades. 40 different countries represented are considered within Asian Pacific Islanders. Currently, this is a number that comes from our AREAA's report last year. Actually, that number is a little higher now. It's not 19.4, I think it's closer to 21 million. The South and the West are seeing the biggest gain, the Asian American Pacific Islander, the growth. And this is actually something that a lot of people are always surprised at, which is that China and India has replaced Mexico as the biggest group of immigrants into the United States as of 2014. So, there's so much discussion, political discussion about immigrants and the wall and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be hard to build a wall in the middle of the ocean, right? So there is, immigration is not a southern border into the U.S. anymore. It's a much more complex and dynamic immigration pattern that we have to kind of think about. Okay, so Asian American Pacific Islander community is very diverse, as you know. You see that here in Hawaii every day. You see the diversity of who makes up this community. But the biggest population, biggest community, is the Chinese community. If you look at all the Asian Americans put together, 22% are of Chinese descent, followed by the Filipinos. I'm not getting into when I say Chinese, someone should say, hey, yeah, I'm Chinese. No? Filipino? No Filipinos? No, there's one. I think there's one Filipino. There's only one Filipino person in this room? Oh my God, where am I? Am I in Hawaii? Oh, okay. where am I? Indian is growing. People from India, East India, I guess people call it, are growing very rapidly. The Vietnamese and Korean. And then the Japanese. Japanese used to be the largest Asian community, but that has changed. The Japanese actually are the only community in the United States where the growth of the community is through birth, not through immigration, right? All the other community, the growth is principally driven by immigration, still to this day. And then you look at the top languages in Asian languages spoken in the U.S., Chinese being one, and so on. You can see it's similar to essentially the size of the population. Obviously, the Filipino community and the Indian community, the language isn't quite the same level of a barrier as it is for the Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese community overall, which is much more linguistically isolated than other communities. Is that everything? Does all those things make sense? Good. Income and savings, Asian community as a whole, we do well, generally do well. Our household income is higher than the national average by quite a substantial margin. It is the Indian community, the East Indian community actually has the highest household median income of all communities. The Indian community, they're very kind of tech savvy, but it's also one of the things that we also kind of point out is the Asian American community is very diverse in terms of their experience, economic experience. So, while the Indian community is doing really, really well, people from the Hmong community, the Laotians, sometimes the income gap is very different. So we do spend some time kind of trying to drill down. There's a lot of effort in the federal government right now at what they call disaggregating data. So not only just saying Asian Americans, but we try to break it down to the Chinese community, Korean, and so on, and try to figure out where the help is needed, where the focus is needed. Actually, the one thing that I would point out is this. AREAA, Asian Real Estate Association of America, we launched a campaign this year, last year, I guess it was last year, called the No Other campaign. Have you ever seen housing reports where there's homeownership rates kind of listed out for the white population, the Hispanic community, the African American, and what's the last category? You know what that is? It's called other. It's called other. The Asian community is part of that other, right? The people from Native Alaskans are part of that other. Native Hawaiians are part of the other. Native Americans are part of the other. And people with multiple race is part of that other. And so one of the things that we, as an organization, as an association, we said, that's just not right. I mean, look how our community is growing, we're getting much more influential. When do we get a seat at the table that is our own, right? So we launched a campaign called the No Other Campaign, and to no other, I really, no more of this other stuff. And part of it is I think people really kind of got, and you don't feel this here on the islands as much because Asian community is the majority. Back in mainland, people don't feel connected, right? Asian communities don't feel connected because they feel like they're, I don't know, kind of the outside folks and all that. And so this whole term, other, made it sound even worse. Like, yeah, I do really feel like another. I don't really feel part of the community. And so we came up with this No Other campaign. We actually, in May, we finally got the agreement of the US Census to finally report out the Asian American Pacific Islander community as a separate home ownership category in this country starting this month, which is a huge, huge success for the organization and for our community. So, thank you. Yeah, so I think everyone needs to be counted, everyone needs to be heard, and so, so in the future, as people report out those numbers on home ownership, our community will get a shot at being heard. So anyway, so that's income, savings. Asian communities tend to save more and have a higher tendency to have more savings account and all that, which is all these things bode well for home ownership, obviously, and wealth accumulation in the years ahead. And that's, is there a tape? Is someone taping all this? That number is even with us not really reporting out most of our income, right? I mean, really, honestly, think about all the businesses. Do you think they report out all their income? There's no one from the IRS here, right? Okay. Oh, that's next. I'm going to be long gone by then. I don't know. Education levels. How many times I don't know. My parents had very low expectations of me, so they didn't say, you got to go to Harvard, but you know what, the Asian kids, right, growing up, you got to go to Harvard, you got to go to Yale or Princeton, whatever. There's a high value in education. Well, about nearly 50% of Asian Americans have a bachelor degree or higher. 50%. That compares to 28% for the nation as a whole. It does, and people, it's not always the case. And I think it was Matt who didn't go to college or graduate or whatever it was. He's an exception to the rule, but for the most part, when you go to college, as opposed to getting just a high school degree, your income projections are very different. There's quite a substantial separation. And so again, it's an opportunity for home ownership, and all those things are going to be tied to that. 21% of AAPIs are super overeducated with PhDs and masters and so on. But again, the level of educational level is also different depending on the community you come from. So the Indian community, as I mentioned to you, with the highest income, also have the highest education level. 70% of East Indians have a bachelor degree or higher. 70%. It is astonishing, right? And if you look at the immigrants, people who are moving from Asia into the US, 50% of immigrants today from Asia into the United States have that same pattern. 50% of them have bachelor degree or higher. So we're booming in. When I immigrated to this country in the 70s with my parents, I had no choice. I just had to, I went along for the ride. But that group of folks weren't quite as educated as the folks today. You have a very different crop of people coming in. And so in some ways, those are folks who are probably more prepared for home ownership because of their income level and so on than ever before. 70% of Indians, East Indians, coming to this country have bachelor degree or higher. So it's probably the most well-educated group of immigrants to ever land on the shores of the United States in history, going back, whatever, several hundred years. So education is important, it's highly valued. The broad economic impact of the Asian American community is significant, and I'm sure you can see it wherever you are here, right? You see it. 1.6 million Asian American owned businesses throughout the United States. They represent about $500 billion of economic output, those businesses alone. They employ nearly 3 million Americans, not just Asian Americans, but just Americans overall. And 1 out of 10 Asian Americans own a business. So these are quite astonishing numbers about our ingenuity, our desire to be a part of this community and this society. And this impact will continue to grow. I believe it's going to continue to grow even more. The buying power. So the buying power, this is essentially what can we afford to buy as a community. Our purchasing power as a community is $1 trillion, it'll be $1 trillion in 2 years. $1 trillion. So if you took the Asian American community, you rounded up all the Asian Americans in the United States, and the economic power, the purchasing power of that would be comparable to the 19th largest country in the world, right? Just the Asian American community. So again, people think about, oh, Asian communities only being 5%, 5-6% of the population, but if you look at the purchasing power, it is quite substantial. And we've seen a 180% growth in the purchasing power since the year 2000, it's nearly triple that of non-Hispanic whites, that growth. So we see the projection and the growth. And the Asian American purchasing power is really is dominated in California. It's 25% of the purchasing power that's represented by the Asian American community is in California, then New York, and then Texas. I'm sure Hawaii probably isn't that far behind. Home ownership growth. So Asian American home ownership, Pacific Islander home ownership, is at 59% today. And while it dropped during the housing crisis a little bit, we have pretty much regained everything that we lost. We're probably the only community who's regained everything we lost after the housing bubble, housing crisis. Everyone else, I think, has still not recovered from where they were. And that's even more of a kind of a interesting, spectacular number, actually, because you think about what I said earlier, which is that we're the fastest growing community. That means our denominator has been increasing faster than any other community, yet our homeownership level has been regained to pre-crisis level. So that's quite an achievement for the community, and it talks about the real desire that our community has for ownership and home ownership overall. Okay, AREAA disproportionate impact on lending business. And this is a thing that I deal with all the time, and back in the States, it's very few lenders. None of the lenders here in this room, but many of the lenders talk about Hispanic and African American lending, which they should. I mean, we think they should talk about those communities, certainly, but very rarely does anyone mention the Asian American community. So I said, well, let's go back last 5 years and look at the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. There's been 2 million loans made to Asian Americans in the last 5 years. 2 million. 600, that's 600 billion, right? 600 billion in total dollars originated. And the average amount is about 300,000. Hispanic community, despite Hispanic community obviously is about 3 times larger than the Asian community, maybe even a little more than 3 times larger than the Asian community. But the last 5 years, a little bit higher in terms of the number of units. In terms of the dollar amount funded, it's at 400. It's 2/3 of the Asian number. The African American community, 1.5 million loans, so less number of loans funded for the African American community, and about 260 billion in loans funded. So I always sort of say, you know what, if you really, I know there's a lot of focus on it, and frankly, I do think those numbers for the Hispanic and African American communities need to go up. Those aren't good enough for this community and this society, honestly. Those numbers need to go up. But I also say, you know what, the Asian community, our numbers are as good or better, but we should be talked about. People should talk about the community, what kind of products we need, and what kind of support we need to get more people in, because obviously, despite the fact that no one talks about us, we still are getting the job done. So I asked a friend of ours from a company called Emergence. They work very closely with Radian And what they do is they do a projection of what the loan volume looks like. They take a lot of different data, not only HMDA data, but population growth, kind of essentially housing starts, everything, projections, and they try to identify the number of loans that would be made to different communities and different census tracts. They literally kind of could go out 3 to 5 years and say, in this market, you'll have this number of loans from this community. So I asked them to just pull data this is just for Honolulu County. I didn't get it for everything. It gives you a sense, so the total purchase loans by units in 2015 was essentially 8,500. Does that sound about right? I hope it is, because I think that's from HMDA. And it tells you conventional is at 6,000, FHA purchase level, and I guess I'm assuming the balance would be jumbos, non-conforming stuff. So that gives you a sense of that. Then you look at the amount that, that the Asian American Pacific Islander community got of that total. So you look at AAPI purchase is out of the 8,426, 4,435 went to an Asian American Pacific Islander, which is consistent with the population of Hawaii, right? So you should expect that kind of number. But AAPI as a AAPI conventional as a total of the total, we tend to go more conventional than Govy, right? FHA or VA, we tend to go more conventional. So you can see we oversample on the government side. But the interesting stuff that you kind of have to look at is, these numbers sound right. About 63% of conventional go to Asian Americans, 68% of FHA, AAPI FHA go to FHA. But you kind of look at where the business is going to be in the future. Like 2019, there's going to be over 10,000 loans made, and you're going to expect to have 5,800 of them, 5,840, go to the Asian American Pacific Islander community. So the strategies and businesses that you have to have, relationships you have to cultivate that and get your fair share of that is really critical. And so that's my only point, is to kind of, it's not only good enough to talk about it, but you have to kind of look at what the real opportunity is and figure out how do you drive business. What kind of LLs do you recruit? What kind of trainings do you do? What kind of community outreach do you do? How do you work with AREAA here in Hawaii to get those relationships that are needed to drive that business back to your institution? Is that good? I think we can have this data available to folks if you like. So, and then I'll just kind of talk about a little bit about. Let me skip through this. I know we're kind of short on time, so let me just. I kind of think about the AAPI opportunities, and alternative credit is one thing that we're working on. As you know, the Asian American community has many of us, because we're immigrants new to this country, that have not established traditional credit. So sometimes FICO does not represent, are able to capture either your thin file or you have no file. But there are other credit scoring models like Vantage scores and others that have come that captures that data. So we're working to get those new products introduced into the market, into the lending market, to be able to drive more lending into the Asian American, other non-traditional communities. Condo loans, I think we talked about that quite a bit with the previous panel. That's obviously a very important thing, and there are some changes that are going to be needed with some of the agencies which have some more restrictive condo requirements. And some of the things that we've talked about, I know Radian and others have talked about this, is pledged assets. We have a lot of kids that want to go to college, or that we want to help them with their down payment, but we don't want to fork over real money. How do we do pledged assets to help support our community as well? So those are some of the ideas that we're working on to figure out ways to expand access to home ownership for the community. Okay, let me talk a little about the international market. I'm going to run through this quickly because you may not do any. How many of you do international buyers? How many? So you have international, kind of foreign national loans? Okay, that's great. How many of you don't have foreign national loans to work with? Some of you. Okay. Just a recruitment opportunity for you to, I'm just kidding. International purchase of U.S. residential real estate is expanding quite substantially. And the impact of Chinese borrowers particularly are significant in the United States. And international buyers tend to buy substantially higher price homes, particularly the Chinese. But the financing options, this is one of the things that we run into a lot, is financing options for foreign buyers are very limited. So if you're able to leverage that, you can expand your business from those clientele. Okay, this is from National Association of Realtors. This gives you the amount of dollars. This is in billions. In billions, how much residential, it's not commercial. Commercial is actually a little smaller than what people buy for residential. 104 billion in residential real estate purchases by a foreign national last year, and that number keeps going up. Right? You can see the trending, and you know, there's more instability in the world, more likely that this is going to keep going the way it is, right? Because we're the safest place to invest, and people know it, and so there's tendency to try to move their money to the United States. This will give you a sense of who makes up the international buyers, right? So this is all of the United States. Asia is the biggest buyer of international real estate in the United States. Latin America, Canada, and Europe makes up the other, but that's Asia. That wasn't always the case. Asia was not the biggest buyer of U.S. Residential real estate, not that far ago, like 3-4 years ago, it wasn't. Now, this gives you a sense of which countries buy how much, right? So Canada used to be the biggest buyer of U.S. real estate, and then big buyers here in the island, right? Canadians. They were buying a lot in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Nevada, some parts of California. But their influence in terms of the amount of purchases have declined, and frankly, because of the because the exchange rate, that's probably going to go down even more, is my guess. The other folks who are going up in a big way, you look at China. 2009, they only bought $4 billion, comparable to Mexico in 2009. Now they purchased last year $28 billion. It's by far the most any country has ever purchased. My guess is that even you go back to Japan, when Japan was buying like crazy into the United States, I don't think they hit those kind of numbers. And my guess, and that's even after the Chinese government are trying to shut down money flowing out, right? So you have to kind of understand, even within that context, you got $28 billion of just residential, not commercial, residential money moving out of China into the US. And that doesn't speak to where else it goes. It goes all around the world. This will give you the sense of the dollar, essentially the value that people are buying, right? So they're international buyers buy higher price homes, basically is the takeaway here. And this is the same thing. This gives you the same, essentially the same information, which is the international buyers spend on average about $500,000 as opposed to your basic U.S., just general population overall. So anyway, that's sort of the only thing I guess I would point out is the Chinese. Actually, if you look at the Chinese numbers for that, it's not 499. It's like closer to 850. It's the Chinese buyers, international buyers, buy substantially more in terms of high-priced homes in the U.S. than anyone else by a long shot. The other thing I guess I would point out with the international buyers is that 2/3 of international buyers buy all cash because sometimes they have a hard time getting financing. They have a hard time finding the right lenders. So if you had, my view is, if you actually had better financing vehicles available, they'll be buying, with the same amount of money that's flowing here, they'll be buying more homes, or more higher priced homes, right, than they are doing right now. So again, it's sort of a missed opportunity, I think, for all of us to kind of think about. But this kind of gives you a sense of the Asian community, the growth of our community, but also the influence of international buyers into the U.S. residential market. So with that, thank you for your time. I really appreciate being invited to this event. I hope I didn't bore you enough, and invite me, if you wouldn't mind inviting me next year, I would really appreciate it as well. Thanks, PJ, for the invite.